Serious. People who have survived a murder attempt by dumb luck. What's your story? I was 14 and outside in my garage petting my cat. It was November, so it was already dark by 5 p.m. Someone opened the door behind me without me hearing, grabbed me by my ponytail, and started dragging me outside. They hit me on my head with a brick and knocked me out, pulled me halfway around my house when, I'm guessing this is when, they stabbed me on the left side of my stomach. This must have brought me out of my daze because my mom said she heard me scream from inside where she and my brother and sister were in the kitchen. They came out the front door and saw me bleeding out on the sidewalk, called 911. Had 12 stitches, double layer, a severe concussion, and whiplash. Didn't eat and hardly slept for a week. They never found them. Somehow believed for nearly 14 years. I was 15 when this happened. Turns out, I was 14. My sister had this one friend when we were growing up I always got a bad vibe from. She would try to pick on my little brother, but I would always stop her. I was 8, she was 10. Once we were at a lake and all the kids were swimming. I swam out to the deep, roped-off part, but I was still little and really shouldn't have. She kept acting weird and getting closer to me, making this weird laugh. She pushed me off the wooden pole in the water and I got scared and started to swim back, but she came up behind me and pushed me under the water. It didn't click at first that she was trying to drown me, but after she aggressively pushed me under the third time, I had this crazy moments of clarity. It was like the world slowed down ever so briefly. I relaxed and let myself sink, swam underneath her, and came up behind her. I grabbed her hair and shoved her face into the water, keeping my legs on her back so her body couldn't rise. I waited until her struggling slowed down and let her come up. I waited in the water, saying nothing, bracing myself for her retaliation, but she just looked panicked and swam back to shore. I told my sister, who had already expressed that the girl was weird. We confronted her together and she just looked really dazed. In a monotone voice, she said, "I'm sorry, I didn't know it would be like that." It wasn't until I replayed those words in my mind much later that I realized what she was saying was, "Sorry I tried to drown you. It wasn't until I was almost drowned myself that I realized how horrible it is to do to someone." I was exiting a bar once after last call and was with a friend who was a medic. We saw a girl laying in a snowbank near a telephone pole who had just been hit by a car. We ran over and tried to help her. Some others were already on the phone with 911 and I, not having any medical training, didn't have anything to contribute but didn't want to just leave. The whole situation was concerning. I turn around for a second and start to hear people screaming. I turn around and a minivan was heading for us, the few people around this woman. They already started to run, but I was too late. He hit me as I was trying to flee, put the car in reverse, ran over me again, and then went forward and run me over a third time. Turns out the guy was high and drunk and got into a fight with the woman's boyfriend, whom I bared a strong resemblance to. He thought I was him. Not to throw a pity party for myself, but 9 years later, I have a ton of medical issues, and my life pretty much started on a downward spiral since then. But sure, I guess I survived. For everyone wondering about the guy, an off-duty cop watched the whole thing go down and copied his license plate number. He was apprehended 20 minutes later, charged with attempted murder, along with many other things. He pled out to just 3 years in jail. He had actually killed someone a few years before drunk driving. How they thought that was appropriate is beyond me. I was riding in a train across Eastern Europe. I was running low on money, and even though I had been warned that a woman should not travel alone in second-class seating, I did not spring for first class. I was sitting alone in one of the compartments that seats 6. This was also a mistake, and a very stupid one to sit alone. Eventually, the train stopped and a man got on. He was very drunk. He came into my compartment and I guess thought I looked like his ex-wife. He attacked me. If it were not for the fact that this particular station was the border between two countries, I would be dead. Instead, Border Patrol from both countries were on the train, and while I was unable to scream, the door was open and at least a half a dozen uniformed men jumped on him and saved me. I was in the hospital for a little while, but recovered. At one point during the trial, one of the cops asked me if I wanted him and his buddies to hold the guy down while I hit him. I thought he was joking. So I said, "No, go ahead, you do it." I was also joking, but it turns out they took it seriously and were about to. I did put a stop to that at least. but they were so offended that someone from their country would attack a young female American tourist. They were furious with him. So many people there depended on tourism. My supposed best friend decided that my wife and I were too perfect. Therefore, it must all be an act and I was obviously abusing her. He was at our house after I made an awesome dinner and we were having fun drinking and singing karaoke. I went to the kitchen to put some glasses away, came back and leaned on the couch with him slightly behind to the left of me. Then I heard a thunk and felt an amazing amount of pain on the top of my head. He had picked up the whiskey bottle on the table and smashed it into my skull. I was very confused as to WTF was happening. Then the blood started pouring. I didn't want to get blood everywhere, so I went to the kitchen. Dude is pacing back and forth saying weird shit. I thought about my gun, which was close by, but I wasn't thinking quite straight. He left. I had a huge concussion and still suffer side effects from it. My number 2 goal in life is to live longer than that asshat just so I can shit on his grave. Throwaway because it got some media. I'm a criminal defense attorney. I was representing this guy that had embezzled almost $500K from his business partner. He was looking down the barrel at 7 years in prison, a bunch of his assets had been seized by the government, was being sued by multiple creditors for north of $2 million, and was in the midst of an ugly divorce and wasn't allowed to see his kids. I was one of the 3 lawyers he had: criminal, civil, and divorce. He was drinking a lot and using coke. I used to get this incoherent phone calls in the middle of the night that ranged from threats to crying. He came to my office one day and asked for me, but I was in court. My secretary said he was perfectly civil. He then went to his divorce lawyer's office and shot him to death. Got stopped by the police a short distance away and was wounded in a shootout. He would later tell the cops that he had come to my office to shoot me that day and also planned to shoot his civil attorney. Mine's not extreme by any chance, but a couple of years ago, my brother and I went to walk the dog at like 11 p.m. We left through the side gate, live on a corner, and right as we exit, I see this weird-looking dude at the corner of the footpath walking weirdly towards us. Got bad vibes and told my brother to get the dog and get back inside. This dude is walking kind of side-on and hiding something in his hand behind his back. As I'm getting my brother through the gate, the dude says something like, "Oi mate, can I come in? I need a blanket and I'm freezing." I just ignored him and went inside and locked the door. We then got a call from the people who lived 2 doors up. The same dude knocked on their door, and their 10-year-old son opened it to see the dude holding a fucking hatchet. Anyway, I'm glad I went with my gut on that one. I was around 20 to 21 years old and walking home at about 3 a.m. after a night out, and I was absolutely plastered from drinking so much. I was about 200 meters from my house when a hooded figure jumped out from behind a bush and immediately had a knife pushing into my stomach as he grabbed my neck and tried pulling me in. Fortunately, I was stronger and pulled away. He went to lunge at me with the knife when suddenly he stopped, stared for what felt like an eternity, but was probably a second or two, and then said, "Holy shit, raise your spoon for war. I haven't seen you in so long. My bad, mate." And then walked off like nothing had happened. I still don't know who he was to this day. Chilling with the bros, drinking at a park. As we drive off to leave, a car coming our way almost hits us. Driver obviously reacts like, "What the fuck?" And I guess the other car noticed. They turned around and caught up to us at a stop sign. Other driver asked if we had a problem. We told them stop driving like assholes. Then their back window rolls down and 2 guys in the back draw Glocks with drum magazines. We just kind of froze up at first, but then our driver pulled off hastily. Later found out those guys got arrested for shooting someone else that same day. Sophomore year of college. Went with a friend to go hang out at his old college. We were supposed to crash with a few friends of his, but we met a few ladies and ended up at a pool party. Next day, went home and my friend started getting calls from one of his buddies' moms asking if he'd seen him. Turns out, in the middle of the night, a few guys broke into the house, kidnapped my friend's buddy and roommate, took their car and drove them out to the middle of nowhere and executed them. I guess it was part of some gang initiation. I was supposed to sleep there with my friend. I still sometimes think about it and get the shivers. Well, I don't know if this counts as an attempt or not, but my wife, my kids, and myself went to church one time, and we ran into one of my wife's old flings. things. This guy followed my wife around and our daughter and kept trying to talk to them. So I confronted him about it and told him to back off. As we were leaving, he makes sure to yell across the parking lot, telling my daughter goodbye. My wife forces me into the car and we leave. So I messaged the guy on Facebook to ask him what his problem is, and he tells me that my wife and daughter are his friends and I have no right to tell them who to be friends with. I told him again to back off or I would call the police. Fast forward a week, I worked every other Sunday. I get a call from the pastor saying they had to call the police on the guy because he was causing drama looking for me. When they arrested him, he had a backpack with him that had a sawed-off shotgun, a meth pipe, and some meth in it. Thank God for my nosy neighbors. I always used to hate how nosy they were. Until this happened. When I was about 10, I was riding my bike outside. My parents always let me ride my bike outside during the summer, but only up and down the street we were on. One day, a man in a van was parked across the street. He called to me, asking me if I had seen his dog and could help him find it. Me, being a dumb child, offered to help him find it, and I started walking towards his van. My neighbor, and older white lady, came bolting out of her house, hooting and yelling, telling the guy to back off. The dude got back in his car in a hurry and took off, and it wasn't until many years later that I realized how bad that situation could have been. I was pushed off a cliff by a former friend at his own birthday party. He was 14 and I was like 12. We were on a hike, just the two of us, and he took a detour and we reached a steep cliff and he just up and pushed me off it. I caught onto a tree root that was jutting out. There was a big tree growing right where I fell. The root grew in a way that part of it was exposed and made a surprisingly good handle. He didn't catch on and simply left me there. I was there for about an hour, if I had to guess, until someone was alerted to my presence and managed to get me back up. I still have nightmares about it. I don't know why he did it, but he had been an insane asshole to me for a long time in retrospect. Edit. Nobody believed me when I told this to them, so he got off scot-free. I haven't seen him since, but I'm pretty sure he's still alive. Walking home from my pregnant girlfriend's house at the time, honestly, it wasn't a bad neighborhood. Well, I'm walking, basically just minding my own business, past these guys, maybe 3 or 4 of them. They were heading the other direction on the other side of the street. Something told me to look back, and right as I did, one of them had a gun pointed to the back of my head. I turned around fully and was just like, yo! They were like, give us your money, etc. I had a wad of dollars and not sure if it was quick thinking, but I stuck my thumb in between the cash, pulled it out, and threw it on the road and it scattered. As they went to pick it up, I bolted. These assholes chased me. I'd just run to some dude's house who, luckily for me, he was cool, let me in, closed the door, and called the cops. A few weeks later, those same dudes were arrested for robbery and killing the person they robbed. These guys were from a neighboring neighborhood. So, yeah. I jumped out of a moving vehicle. This was in college in a different country. There were commuter buses that takes us to and from the campus and dorms. I had to stay 30 minutes later for a project, so around 7:30 p.m. By then, the commuter rush was gone. I was the only passenger, and I was sitting at front next to the driver. He was acting already shady. It was dark and rainy. He made a sudden dark turn of a grassy, unlit hill. He said something's wrong with the tires. I said, I'm getting off. He won't let me. The hill leads to a cliffside where rapes and murders have happened before. I had the pointy stick of my umbrella facing him, ready to jab if he tried anything, which he tried to reach or grab for me. I jumped and ran straight to the highway where another commuter bus stopped, surprised seeing a girl coming out of the tall grasses. I saw the driver of my previous ride speeding away. Nothing was wrong with his tires. I went to Trafalgar Square for New Year with my friend about 18 years ago. We got totally sloshed on whiskey, fantastic atmosphere, hundreds of people walking around. From memory, I must have looked really pissed. That's whiskey for you. Went for a stroll outside the bar on my own, stumbling probably. Grinning ear to ear when a stranger took my arm and started walking away with me. I was so out of it that I just went along. We bumped into a couple and I very quietly pleaded that I didn't know this person. Thankfully, they stopped and pretended they knew me and dragged me back. Always dread to think what would have happened. Posting for my dad, I'll call him John. He grew up during the Troubles in Northern Ireland, and at the time, there were numerous tit-for-tat shootings between Republicans and Loyalists. My dad was walking home when a car pulled up quickly and men with masks, bats, and guns jumped out. He started running, but they caught up with him. Just as they got to him, they stopped and one pulled off his baklava and said, "Oh shit, John, didn't realize it was you. Thought you were someone else, we're so sorry." He said he genuinely thought he was about to die there and then. And if he had have been someone else, he would have been. I, 18 female back then, now 25, was on my way home at night after meeting a friend. My home was just 10 minutes away from the train station. After a few minutes, I felt someone following me. No big deal, I thought, just someone else walking home. But I started walking faster. I realized the person behind me was catching up. Weird. In my head, I started to make up scenarios of how to defend myself if the person would attack me. Never would I think of this to actually happen. Well, until I felt something on the back of my head hitting me hard. I went furious. I turned around and attacked the guy. My mind was just full of anger towards this stranger who, what I thought, hit me. We were wrestling until I fell on the ground. He was sitting on top of me, strangling me. I tried to crawl my nails into his eyes as deep as I could, but I started to black out. Suddenly, there was this thought in my head. Wake up, or you will die. Well, adrenaline kicked in, and I opened my eyes and screamed at the top of my lungs, attacking him again. That helped. He stood up and began to run. I laid there for a few seconds, then I started to run home, still screaming. My mom was already at our door and opened for me because my screams woke her up, or her mother senses, who knows. She immediately called the cops, and they could arrest him on the same night. It turned out that he had actually shot me in my head from behind. They assumed that the gun didn't work properly, the bullet didn't penetrate my skull and just stuck in there. But as far as I know, they never found out why the gun misfired. I'm glad, though. He told the cops that he already followed me a few times in the past, but never had the guts to do it. He wanted to kill me and rape my dead body. I know that's a wild story. I have some Swiss newspaper articles as a source if anyone cares, though. In my late teens, I used to buy my weed from random dudes in the projects, low-income housing. One day, we gave some money to a guy named 40. He took it and went inside one of the buildings. We waited in the car for several minutes. We started to think he had taken our money and left. Right about that time, a car full of coked-up white dudes pulled up beside ours. Apparently, my friend owed them money. They pointed a gun at him and said if he had enough money to buy weed, then he could pay them back. I really thought they were going to shoot us and just drive off like it was nothing. And I hadn't even done anything wrong. I thought I was going to pee my pants. Right about that time, 40 came back out with our weed and an even bigger gun. He scared them away, and then we went back to his apartment and smoked a blunt. What a good man. Turns out, he was only selling weed because he had a 6-year-old daughter, and that was the only way he knew to give her a better life than he had. I babysat his daughter occasionally for the rest of that summer. I really hope she got a decent childhood and that her dad stayed safe and out of jail. TLDR. Almost got shot, but was saved by random drug dealer who turned out to be a decent fellow. This all happened many years ago. I was a lead man at a factory. A girl starts working there, and I take an interest. After a few months, I found out she is in a terrible drug-fueled, abusive relationship. Every night, I tell her to call me. I'll come get her. Finally, after months, she calls me. I come get her and take her to my house. The guy she was in the relationship with didn't take too kindly to me taking her away. He spends the next 2 years harassing and threatening us. A few months after she and I got married, we went out for a few drinks. Her ex just happened to be at the bar we went to. He apologized to us for the threats and harassment. We were sitting outside talking with a few other people. Next thing I know, I'm on my back on the ground with someone choking me. I try all I can to get them off of me, but being blindsided and them being on top of me, it wasn't easy. As I struggle to get free, everything goes black. Then I see the light at the end of the tunnel. In that moment, I was certain that this would be the end of me. I somehow managed to get a better hold of this person's head, and I yank them off of me. We run to the car and get away. A week or so later, my wife had been talking to everyone she thinks might know what happened. Turns out, her ex had paid 2 people $50 to kill me that night.